Hey, I'm super excited to be chatting with Simon Thompson. He's a digital media expert and founder of Podseeker.co. And anyone that knows me knows that I totally geek out on software and apps and tools. And so saw Podseeker and went, Simon, you have to come chat with me on Leverage Your Podcast show. And yeah, it's such an interesting topic, Simon, about podcast influencer marketing. Because as soon as you think influencer marketing, of course, you think of Instagram and like TikTok and like YouTube, and that's it, right? So for those that are kind of like stuck in that space, what would you say podcast influencer marketing is? And first of all, welcome and hi.
Thank you very much for having me, Lyndsay. Yeah, super excited to be here. So yeah, I guess podcast influencer marketing, it's odd because there's sort of like this crossover happening between I'd say like PR marketing and influencer marketing. It's like a subset of that. Influencer marketing like is pretty similar to PR in a lot of ways, in that it's trying to leverage someone else's audience to get your offer in front of people. So if you think of like, if you're doing that on Instagram or what have you, maybe you pay an influencer for that, or maybe you sweeten the pot for them and give them some free products, and they mention your product to their audience. Right. And that's pretty well understood, and people have been doing that for a while now, kind of like since the start of Instagram. And then on the other side, like people have been doing, I'd say podcast PR for a bit as well, which is often like pitching yourself as a guest, or
right.
Like pitching a story to a podcaster and having that podcaster kind of mention that, whether it's the offer or the story or what have you, to their audience. And so podcast influencer marketing is sort of like a combination of those two, where it's like, rather than just pitching a guest spot, maybe it's like, I'd like to pay for a paid promotion within this podcast. So it's like a sort of like an advertisement, but it might be a bit more like in depth and a bit more like integrated into the show, much like how an Instagram influencer might mention a product. Yeah, it's sort of like integrated into the content that they create. So yeah, that's how I'd kind of define it.
So it's not quite like paid ads or sponsorship. It's more like someone giving props to your product,
it's
or
interesting,
thing, or validating it, or
exactly. It's odd because there is a crossover with paid ads. I mean, you could think of it like a paid ad in the same way that you could think of like an Instagram influencer as a paid ad, because you're paying them to promote your stuff. But I think like the baggage that comes with podcast advertising is that it's like, it's ZipRecruiter paying $1 million to, like the Gimlet Media Network over a 6-month period, and like running these very like structured and like formatted ads.
Right.
Whereas podcast influencer marketing, I think, has more connotations of it's for, like perhaps niche products towards niche audiences, where the ad format is kind of a bit more flexible, rather than just like there is a 30-second spot at the front and that's it. It might be a bit more organic, where the podcaster kind of mentions it throughout the podcast in a place where it's going to be relevant and most helpful to the audience.
That makes sense. And to me, it's like when I hear podcast influencer marketing, to me, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm an entrepreneur, but if I guessed it on a high profile show, I'm tapping into their audience as like they're the influencer. So like, am I right in that thinking as well?
Yeah. So again, you could think of that as like podcast influencer marketing. I think traditionally, like that kind of thing has typically been called podcast PR, but like the term you use is sort of like there will be disagreement there, but it's all trying to achieve the same goal of like trying to leverage someone else's audience to get your offer or your story in front of those people.
That makes sense.
So there are a lot of similarities.
I know. And there's like a lot of crossovers and gray area, and it all gets kind of muddied together. So for someone like all the podcasters that are out there that are freshly launched, been running for a year, 5 years, whatever, is there like a certain type of podcast that can take advantage of this strategy? And like, who's it right for and who's it not right for?
Yeah, so for the podcasters themselves, so if they would like to, have people come on to their show or promote offers on their own shows, it, I mean, it's fairly broad in terms of like who can leverage it the most. I tend to see a lot of like health podcasts leveraging this the most for whatever reason that might be. I don't know, it might just be like an audience that kind of lends itself well to the promotion of certain types of products. I'm
Yeah,
not sure, but I don't think there's anything really like specifically preventing any kind of like industry or anything like that. I
fair
mean, if
enough.
there's a good offer that can be put in front of an audience, then it can be a workable channel. And like any other channel, it's something that you should test it with a small budget, see if it takes, and then if it works, scale it up. And it's going to be right for some people, and it's not going to be right for others. But yeah, it's kind of hard to tell, like all marketing channels, really.
I know, right? How to track that ROI.
Yeah.
Because I was interviewing someone a couple of weeks ago and they were in like the essential oil space. And she
Mhm.
had a podcast and then was, talking about products and stuff like that. And um I guess she had affiliate links for the stuff and made a ton of money. So is it like tied into like affiliate links of products that
Yeah,
maybe?
that's a really good point. I think like that space in particular, like the health and wellness space, like it's just sort of I don't know. It seems to be a more marketing minded audience, like group of podcasters as well as
Yeah,
people promoting the products. And yeah, there is like a lot of affiliate activity already happening. And yeah, I think there's just more of a mindset of yeah, like how can we work together to like
yeah.
put offers in front of the audience and make it most relevant for my audience. And yeah, so I think there's something going on there for sure.
Yeah. And so like I guess sometimes it's hard for people to like what does that mean for me? Like how do I implement this? What does it mean? Um like what advice would you give to someone that was like a newbie saying, "Hey, I would love to tap into influencers to grow my podcast, obviously my revenue, my list, whatever."
Mhm.
Um like where do you start?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, I guess there's two sides to this. Like, if you're the podcaster, and then there's
Right.
if you're the person who would like to get their offers in front of people. If you're the person who'd like to get your offers in front of people, which by the way, they could be the same person, like because podcasters often like run a business as well, and
Yeah.
and the podcast is like a marketing channel for that business, so it can go both ways. So if you're the person who would like to work with other podcasts to promote your offer, I sort of have like this 5-step framework that you can go through,
Perfect.
so I can just kind of like breeze through that, I
Yeah,
suppose.
absolutely.
But the first thing you need to understand is like what is your goal, like whether it's going to be am I looking for like directly sales on this, or am I looking to just build credibility, build like awareness of who I am and who my brand is, and things like that. That is going to have an effect on like which type of podcasts do you reach out to promote
Yeah.
the offer. So it's just good to have an understanding of exactly what you're going for here. The second thing that you're going to need is podcast data, and this is essentially like why I built the app that I now run, which is
Mm,
podseeker.co. Because if you've ever tried to like search for podcasts that are out there, there's not that many good ways to do it. Like if let's say I have a health product and I want to find health related podcasts to promote that product. Usually what you would do is, and I've kind of had this experience before, like you type into Google like top health podcasts or best health
hmm.
podcasts, and you get 10 articles on the first page of Google that all mention the same podcasts that are like the big podcasts in the space. And that can be somewhat helpful if like those are the podcasts that you want to go out after, but like there's this long tail of like thousands of other health
Totally.
podcasts that could be far more relevant. And then the other method that you might use is just like search through iTunes for things like health podcasts or what have
Right.
you. But the limitation there is you can only search for keywords, and then you don't
Right.
really have any other information on the podcast. Like how many people might listen to this podcast, how much might it cost to advertise on this podcast, and like what frequency do they release episodes, and do they accept interviews, and what are their social media links and stuff like that. So Podseeker can help with that, which is, you know, why I created it. But I mean, there are other methods to get that data, but yeah, the next thing
It takes a long time.
Yeah,
And sometimes it's
sure.
like a shot in the dark. Like if I pitch
Yeah,
myself to be on their podcast, like, or work with them or whatever it may be, like, is their audience what I'm looking for? Like, do they have a big audience? How long have they been doing it for? Like, you know, you really have to do a lot of R&D to kind of figure out and do like your due diligence before you know, look into it further and call them or whatever.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that again, that's like why I created the thing
Perfect. Yeah. And we'll
to just
chat
like,
just in case anyone's curious. We will be touching upon what Podseeker is and what it does. I had a peek of it in myself, so can share as well. Anyways, go ahead.
awesome. Yeah, cool. So that's number two. So you need like podcasts to reach out
Yeah.
to put that in the simplest terms possible. The third thing that you're going to need is an offer for that podcaster, because
Makes
like
sense.
the podcaster doesn't necessarily, you know, they may not know you, and like why would they promote your stuff to their audience? Like that's kind of like a big step for them. So you need to, you know, sweeten the pot for them. That could just be cash. It could be like free products. It could be like, I'll promote you on my podcast if I have my own podcast. So there's a few things that you can do there. Number four is a format for that spot. Like I said, that, you know, like podcast advertising tends to be like these 30-second spots, and that's sort of about it. Whereas with podcast influencer marketing, although like I said, there are some similarities, you have a lot more flexibility in what you do. So it might be a 30-second spot that's like pre-recorded and just inserted into their podcast, or it might be something that the host reads that's, you know, scripted, or it might be something that's completely unscripted, or it might just be, you know, I'll casually comment on this product throughout the podcast because I think it's going to be helpful for my audience. Anyway, you obviously don't want to like do anything too like shady or manipulative, or like make it seem like you're just like selling products and stuff. Like it's obviously going to be helpful for the audience.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. But yeah, if it's going to be helpful for the audience and it's like a win-win-win, then
I know.
Yeah,
and product reviews to me, like I love that, because I want to know what people, you know, what they've experienced and if they like it and that kind of thing. Everyone loves product reviews.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's like another thing that I really like about podcast influencer marketing, is that there's just a lot more like flexibility in terms of how you can promote those offers. And then the last thing is an offer for the audience, which is so, you know, I'm promoting my product, like, and the podcaster is going to mention it to their audience. Like how are they going to mention it and how are they going to like incentivize the audience to take up the offer? Like, is it going to be, you know, a discount, or is there going to be a competition that's a giveaway, or what have you? There's like a number of ways that you can sort of position that offer to the audience, so that everyone kind of wins from that. But yeah, they're the five like main steps that people need to go through. Happy to kind of drill down on any of those in particular.
No, that was perfect. And it was succinct, but it totally makes sense. And it's funny because when I first, you know, saw Podseeker, and I was like, okay, I don't really get it. And so not that I didn't get it, but I'm like, okay. So, but once I went in, I was like, oh, it's like, you know, you search for podcasts and like you could actually see how long they've had their podcast for, how many episodes, how many downloads, roughly that they have like per episode. So you can kind of see the level of success. But honestly, Simon, what I loved was being able to find certain shows on a more granular level. Because I've searched, like, let's say I want to be on a content marketing podcast, and you kind of search, but like you said, with the keywords, it was really tricky. And I like did a search, and like all these came up, and they were like, I'm like, save to list, so I can check them out later. I'm like, oh, that was easy. It was awesome.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, that is what I was going for. Like, it's not a what's the word? It's not overly complicated. Like it's fairly straightforward in what it does, but what it does, I like to think it does relatively well, which is like search granularly for podcasts.
Yeah. And that to me was huge because it saves like a ton of time. So I've been in it, but for the listeners that aren't quite picturing what I'm picturing, obviously, can you kind of explain like what it is and its features and how it'll help them?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think the simplest way to think of it is like a granular search engine for podcasts. So if you think of like if you were to go to like a Google search bar, you could type in a keyword and, let's say like health, I put in a keyword like health and wellness or something like that. But then I could also drop down advanced filters and say, well, yeah, I want the health and wellness podcast, but there's 10,000 of them. And most of them, maybe just publish like 5 episodes. So let's remove the ones that have, only published 5 episodes. I only want the ones that have published like at least 20 episodes. So they're well-established shows and they're up and running. And then there might be a lot of those shows that just don't have many people listening to it, which may or may not be what you're going for. You might want to go for podcasts.
Sometimes it doesn't matter if you have a smaller audience.
Exactly.
Sometimes they're more engaged, right? And if you have a specific niche and you really want to go after that versus a broad group, like the numbers might be less, but the conversion would be higher.
Completely, yeah. And so that audience number can, as you say, like go either way. Like I often find myself filtering out like the bigger podcasts because it's like, well, I'm probably not going to go on how I built this or whatever, like something like that. Whereas like there are like a lot of real niche podcasts which have like smaller audiences but very engaged audiences who have a really good relationship with the host. So that's another thing you can filter by. Another thing you can filter by is if you're looking to run advertisements, you could see how much is it likely to cost to advertise on a given podcast.
Yeah, I forgot you had that.
And by the way, these listenership numbers, people might be thinking like, how do you get the listenership numbers? And it's like it's an estimated number, but it's a relatively decent ballpark because like often you just need to know like, is this closer to 5 or 10,000 listeners, or is it closer to like 100 or 200 listeners? And we tend to get in that ballpark. So at the end of the day, like you're going to need to reach out and like have a conversation with the podcast to see what the offer is going to be and all of that, and you should ask these questions. But if you need a ballpark, then that listenership number can be really good. And then other things, like when's the last time they published an episode? Have they published an episode in the last like 6 months? Because if they haven't, then they're probably not active and worth reaching out to. So there are a couple of the things that you can filter by, and then when you run your search, you get all the podcasts that match that criteria, and then you're able to see all of those metrics that I just mentioned, things like the listenership and how much it might cost to advertise for each individual podcast, as well as, and this is sort of one of the crucial components is like email addresses and contact details, and websites and places to get in touch with those podcasts if you want to start reaching out to them and building those relationships.
Yeah, it was really handy. And I loved, because I thought it's funny because I thought to myself, ooh, that one's good, but I don't have time to like fully go into it. Am I going to bookmark it? Like, how am I going to write that on a spreadsheet? But then I saw on the right-hand side that you said like add to a list, and you can have different lists. Like, what if I'm looking for podcasts about podcasts, or what if I'm looking them, about finance, or so you can like have these little categories, because it is good to be on different types of shows and see which ones work better for you. Because sometimes what you think is going to convert and is your target audience may not necessarily be. So it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the media lists is something I didn't mention. So like exactly as you say, like you might want to, I don't know, I'm going to go pitch myself on 20 of these health and wellness podcasts or 20 of these podcasts about podcasting, and it doesn't make sense to like have them all in the same list, and then when you download that data, you've got it all in the same place and you're writing the same message to all of them. So you can kind of separate those.
Oh, and if I can download the data?
Well, you can download that as a
I did not know
CSV.
that. There you go. Some features I don't know. Do you
Yeah.
have guests and hosts on there? Like what kind of mix of shows or what kind of mix of people do you have in there?
Yeah, so it's all podcasts at the moment.
Right.
We're looking at building out like the guest side of the marketplace, or yeah,
It's a
creating
whole nother
making
ball of
it so
wax for
so that it
sure.
is a yeah, for sure. So because at the moment, like we have every just about every podcast that
Mhm.
exists in the world is in there. Whereas finding specific guests can be a bit more tricky.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something that we definitely want to look into. But yeah, like I said, what I often find is like podcasters tend to mix in the same circles. So actually, yeah, as an
Yes.
aside, like one of the I don't know, unexpected side effects, I suppose, of building this. Like I built it for PR people essentially at
Hmm.
first, but then I noticed marketers wanted to use it. But then, yeah, the thing I really didn't expect was like a lot of podcasters themselves use it because they would want to connect with other podcasters. Like I said, yeah, they're often running their own business themselves and they obviously see the value in podcasts. And so they want to pitch themselves onto a
Hmm.
podcast and promote their offers to other podcasts. And the other thing is like I've run podcasts in my time as well, is like a really great way to promote your own podcast, as I'm sure you know, is to be a guest on other podcasts, because
Absolutely.
like those people on those podcasts are listening to podcasts, and so like you at least tick that box that they're into podcasts, and
Hmm.
then maybe they'll be into my podcast as well. So yeah, I've found it's a really helpful podcast, not only for the PR side but also for the podcaster side as well.
I know, honestly, that's why I was looking and had like the two lists because I'm like, I want to see what other podcasts are out there. But, and also if they're an expert in a field that's like, a parallel to mine and not like strict competition kind of a thing, then it would make sense for me to have them on my show. And like you do that, right? You do podcast swaps. And then really, you're going to know that they know what they're doing. They're used to interviewing. They're going to be professional. They know the drill. They're not going to be total newbie. It does make your life easier as a podcast host or a guest or whichever. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
funny you say that because that's exactly kind of what went through my head. Yeah, it is
Yeah, for
really
sure.
handy.
That's yeah, like the yeah, the yeah, exactly as you say, like the people who are going to make like really great guests on podcasts are people who have their own
Mhm.
podcasts, generally speaking. So, yeah.
If we do say so
Yeah.
ourselves. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What's next for Podseeker? Have you got anything coming up or anything new? Any plans?
Yeah, so yeah, the big thing is building out that like the other side of the marketplace. So getting like a guest
Yeah,
marketplace in there.
cool.
That's going to be like the big project moving into this year. The other thing will be not so much adding new features, but sort of like refining a lot of the features that we have.
Mm,
I mean, there will be some new features like we're looking to add like social media numbers. So if I have like a podcast and then that podcast has a social media handle associated to it,
right.
like how many followers, like let's say it's a Twitter handle, how many followers does the Twitter handle have?
Oh,
And then I could say, okay, well, the podcast has whatever, 100 listeners per episode, but like their Twitter following is like 2
right.
million or something like that, and so that might be kind of relevant over there. So that's another thing, more like social media data. We want to refine the listenership algorithm because, like I said, it gets you a pretty good ballpark, but we can always do better with that. So we're working on that. But yeah, definitely the main project is getting guests to
Nice.
come on, and so podcasters can
That's a
say,
big
I need a
job.
guest. I need yeah yeah totally. Yeah, because there's no like there's already a directory of podcasts that I can be like, okay, iTunes, like I can bring all that in and then add some more data. There's not really a directory of like
No.
guests. I mean, there are a few, but like they're gated and they're incomplete. Yeah, so it's a big project.
Awesome. And the great thing about it is that people can have a free trial to check it out. I know I loved it right away. Where can they go to grab their free trial and kind of check out all the features and see what it's all about?
Yeah, for sure. So if you just go to podseeker.co, you'll be able to jump into the free trial, 7 days. You can cancel at any time and see if it's for you. And if it is, then it's just a monthly recurring subscription. No locking contracts, anything like that.
No, it's perfect. Yeah. I know I'm using it. I've got my little lists sorted out. Thanks for coming on and sharing about podcast influencer marketing and, helping other podcasters, take it to the next level and grow it.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks so much for having me, Lyndsay. I really enjoyed it. And look forward to keeping in touch.